The sky over Earth changed on a quiet Tuesday morning. At first, people thought it was a strange cloud. Then they thought it was a trick of the light. But within minutes, every space agency on the planet knew the truth. Something enormous had entered Earth's orbit. Something that did not belong there. It was not one ship. It was hundreds. They hung in the sky like a wall of dark metal, blocking out patches of sunlight across entire continents. Each ship was larger than the biggest cities on Earth. Together, they formed a shadow that stretched across the sky from horizon to horizon. In control rooms across the world, alarms rang without stopping. Radar systems that had never shown more than a handful of satellites were now overloaded with thousands of new signals. No one had authorized this. No one had seen it coming. One moment the sky was empty. The next, it was full. General Sarah Chen stood in the underground command center beneath Washington, D.C., her eyes fixed on the giant screen in front of her. The room was full of noise, officers shouting orders, phones ringing, screens flashing red. But Sarah said nothing. She simply stared at the fleet above them, trying to understand what she was looking at. "Ma'am," a young officer said, his voice shaking. "We're getting a transmission. It's on every frequency, every language, all at once." "Play it," Sarah said. The room went silent. Then a voice filled the command center. It was not a human voice. It was deep, calm, and cold, like something that had said the same words 1,000 times before and expected the same result every time. "People of Earth, we are the Galactic Council. For 10,000 years we have governed the stars. 1,000 worlds bow to our rule. You are now the 1,001st. The voice paused, as if giving them time to feel small. "You have no fleet capable of resisting us. You have no weapon that can harm us. Surrender now and your world will be spared. Resist, and your world will be erased, as all others who resisted before you were erased. You have 1 hour to respond." The transmission ended. For a long moment, nobody in the room moved. Sarah finally broke the silence. "Get me the president. Get me every world leader we can reach. Now." Within 20 minutes, a call connected every major government on Earth. Presidents, prime ministers, generals, and scientists all appeared on screens, their faces pale with fear. Nobody had a plan. Nobody had ever imagined this day would come. "We can't fight that," said the Russian defense minister, his voice tight. "Our entire nuclear arsenal wouldn't scratch one of those ships." "Then we surrender," said another leader. "We have no choice." "Wait," said Dr. Elena Vasquez, a scientist sitting quietly in the corner of the screen. She was not a politician or a general. She was the head of a secret research project that few people in the room even knew existed. "Before anyone decides anything, I need 5 minutes with the president. Alone." The room fell quiet again. Sarah frowned. She had heard rumors about Elena's project, something buried deep in classified files, something about the ocean floor and old signals from space. She had never been given clearance to know more. The president nodded slowly. "Everyone else stay on standby. Elena, you have 5 minutes." The private call connected. Elena's face filled the screen, tired but focused. "Mr. President," she said, 8 years ago, a deep-sea research team found something at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. Not a shipwreck, not a natural rock formation, a structure, ancient, made of a material we still cannot identify. We kept it secret because we didn't understand what we found." "What does this have to do with the fleet above us?" the president asked. "Everything," Elena said. "Inside that structure we found data, star maps, warnings, written in a language we spent years decoding. Most of it we still don't understand, but one part was clear. One location, marked again and again, with the same symbol repeated beside it." She paused. The symbol meant, "Do not approach." The president leaned forward. "And we believe that location holds something the ancient builders were terrified of," Elena said. "Something so dangerous they warned every future civilization to stay away. We don't know what it is. We've never sent anything there. But if the Council has explored this galaxy for 10,000 years, if they've conquered 1,000 worlds, they may have gone near it before, the President finished. And it's possible, Elena said slowly, that whatever is there has a very long memory. The hour passed like a held breath. News spread across the planet within minutes. Streets that were usually busy with morning traffic went quiet. People stood outside, looking up at the dark shapes blocking their sky. Children were pulled indoors. Prayers were said in every language in every corner of the world. Sarah stood in the command center, watching the countdown timer on the main screen tick down. 3 minutes left. "Ma'am," the young officer said again, "we need a decision. What do we tell them?" Sarah looked at the small screen where the President's face waited. "Sir, what's the order?" The President took a deep breath. On the screen beside him, Elena gave a small nod. "Send the coordinates," the President said. "Nothing else. No message, no surrender, no threat, just the numbers." Sarah blinked. "Sir, are you sure? If this is wrong, if it provokes them..." "Sarah," the President said quietly, "if we surrender, we lose everything for certain. If we fight, we lose everything for certain. This is the only option that isn't certain. Send it." Sarah turned to the officer. "Do it. Send only the coordinates, no other message." The officer's hands trembled slightly over the keyboard. He typed a short string of numbers, the exact coordinates that Elena's team had decoded years ago, and pressed send. On every screen across the world in every language, humanity's answer to the most powerful force in the galaxy left Earth's atmosphere. Not a plea, not a surrender, just numbers. Far above, inside the command ship of the Galactic Council fleet, Fleet Commander Threx Varan sat upon his throne of dark metal, watching the small blue planet below through the massive viewport. He had conquered 43 worlds in his long career. He had heard every kind of response a frightened species could offer. Pleas, threats, prayers, silence. He had seen it all, but he had never seen this. "Commander," said his communications officer, a smaller alien with pale, glowing eyes. "We've received their response." "Play it," Threx said, already bored. He expected words. Weak words. Maybe an attempt at defiance that would amuse him for a moment before he gave the order to begin the invasion. "Sir, it's not a message," the officer said, confusion clear in his voice. "It's coordinates, just coordinates, nothing else." Threx's massive head turned slowly toward the officer. "Coordinates? To what?" The officer's fingers moved quickly across his console, feeding the numbers into the ship's navigation system. A star map appeared on the main screen, zooming out from Earth, out past the edge of the solar system, out through empty space, further and further, until it reached a small marked point deep in a region of space the fleet had never bothered to chart. The bridge went quiet. "That's..." the officer began, then stopped. "That's nothing," Threx said, standing from his throne. "That's an empty region. There's no world there, no fleet, no weapon platform. It's nothing but dead space." He let out a low, rumbling laugh, the kind that echoed through the entire bridge. "Is this a joke? Did this pathetic species just try to confuse us with a meaningless set of numbers? Perhaps they hoped we would waste time investigating nothing while they prepared some hidden defense." The bridge crew laughed nervously along with their commander, relieved to see him unbothered. "Increase orbital positioning," Threx ordered. "Begin preparations for planetary subjugation. If Earth wishes to play games instead of answering properly, we will teach them the cost of wasting our..." "Commander," the communications officer interrupted, his voice suddenly sharp with alarm. "The ship's threat database. It's flagging the coordinates." Threx turned. "What?" "The archive," the officer said, staring at his screen in disbelief. "It's an old archive. Pre-council. From the first expansion era 10,000 years ago. There's a flag on this exact location." "Read it," Threx snapped, his amusement fading. The officer's glowing eyes flickered as he read the ancient text aloud, his voice growing quieter with every word. "Region designated, the silent grave. 17 expedition fleets sent. 17 expedition fleets lost. No survivors. No wreckage recovered. No further exploration authorized. All future contact forbidden. Silence fell across the bridge. Threx stared at the star map, at the small marked point that Earth, a supposedly primitive, defenseless species, had sent to them without a single word of explanation. He had laughed a moment ago. He was not laughing now. "Commander," the officer said carefully. "Orders?" Threx did not answer immediately. He stood in front of the viewport, looking down at the small blue planet below, no longer seeing it as helpless. For the first time in his long career of conquest, Fleet Commander Threx Voran felt something he had almost forgotten the meaning of: fear. Back on Earth, in the underground command center, Sarah Chen watched the alien fleet on the main screen. Nothing had happened yet. No attack, no retreat. The ships simply hung in the sky, motionless, silent. "What are they doing?" the young officer whispered. Sarah didn't answer. She glanced at the small screen where Elena's tired face still waited, watching the same silence unfold. "Elena," Sarah said quietly, "what's out there, at those coordinates? What did we just send them toward?" Elena was silent for a long moment, her eyes fixed on something far beyond the screen. "I don't know," she finally admitted. "But whatever it is, the people who left that warning were afraid enough to mark it in every star chart they had. And they weren't primitive, Sarah. Their technology was far beyond ours, maybe even beyond the Council's." Sarah looked back at the frozen fleet above Earth. "So we just poked something we don't understand, hoping it scares away something else we don't understand." "Yes," Elena said quietly. "And if it doesn't work?" Elena didn't answer that question. Nobody could. Above them, in the dark silence of space, the massive Council fleet remained still, its commander staring at a single point on a star map, weighing a decision that would decide the fate of an entire planet. The countdown timer on Earth's monitors had reached 0 minutes ago, but no attack had come. Not yet. The Council fleet did not move for 6 hours. Across Earth, people stood in the streets staring up at the sky, waiting for the ships to attack, waiting for the ships to leave, waiting for anything. But the massive dark shapes simply hung there, unmoving, like a held breath that refused to be released. Inside the underground command center, Sarah Chen had not slept. She stood in front of the main screen, watching the same frozen image of the fleet, hour after hour. The young officer beside her kept refreshing the sensor data, hoping for a change that never came. "Ma'am," he said finally, "should we send another message? Try to open communication?" "No," Sarah said. "We already said everything we're going to say. Now we wait." On the smaller screen beside her, Elena Vasquez's face remained just as tired, just as focused. She had been awake even longer than Sarah, buried in old files, trying to remember every detail of the ancient archive her team had found 8 years ago. "Elena," Sarah said quietly, "tell me what you know. All of it, not just what you told the president." But no attack had come. Not yet. The Council fleet did not move for 6 hours. Across Earth, people stood in the streets, staring up at the sky, waiting for the ships to attack, waiting for the ships to leave, waiting for anything. But the massive dark shapes simply hung there, unmoving, like a held breath that refused to be released. Inside the underground command center, Sarah Chen had not slept. She stood in front of the main screen, watching the same frozen image of the fleet, hour after hour. The young officer beside her kept refreshing the sensor data, hoping for a change that never came. "Ma'am," he said finally, "should we send another message? Try to open communication?" "No," Sarah said. "We already said everything we're going to say. Now we wait." On the smaller screen beside her, Elena Vasquez's face remained just as tired, just as focused. She had been awake even longer than Sarah, buried in old files trying to remember every detail of the ancient archive her team had found 8 years ago. "Elena," Sarah said quietly, "tell me what you know. All of it. Not just what you told the president. Elena rubbed her eyes and nodded slowly. 8 years ago, my team was studying deep ocean trenches in the Pacific, mapping the seafloor for geological research. We found a structure 2 miles down, buried under centuries of sediment. It wasn't natural. It wasn't anything we had ever seen. What did it look like? Sarah asked. Like nothing built by human hands, Elena said. Smooth black material, harder than any metal we could test. No seams, no welds, no signs of construction tools. It was shaped like a long chamber, half buried in rock that was millions of years old, which meant the structure was there before the rock formed around it. Sarah's eyes widened slightly. That's impossible. That's what we thought too, Elena said. But it was real, and inside we found a chamber filled with something like data storage, crystal panels covered in symbols. It took my team 6 years to decode even part of it. And what did you find? Elena paused, choosing her words carefully. Star charts, thousands of them. Charts of regions of space we hadn't even discovered yet with our telescopes. And on almost every single chart, one location was marked again and again, always with the same warning symbol beside it. The coordinates we sent, Sarah said. Yes, Elena said. We named it the marked point internally because we didn't know what else to call it. We never learned what built the structure. We never learned what species left the warning. But whoever they were terrified of that location. Terrified enough to record it in charts that were built to survive for millions of years. Sarah looked back up at the frozen fleet. And now we've pointed the most powerful force in the galaxy straight toward it. Yes, Elena said again, quieter this time. We have. Far above Earth, aboard the Council command ship, the bridge remained tense. Fleet Commander Threx Voran had not left his position in front of the viewport for hours. His officers moved quietly around him, afraid to disturb his thoughts, afraid of what he might decide. Threx was old, even by Council standards. He had served for over 300 years, rising through the ranks by winning battles that other commanders called impossible. He had personally overseen the conquest of 43 worlds. He did not know fear. Fear was a feeling for weaker species, for the primitives who bowed before council ships and begged for mercy. But the words on that ancient archive had lodged themselves deep in his mind, and he could not shake them loose. 17 expedition fleets lost, no survivors, no wreckage recovered. He turned to his second-in-command, a sharp-eyed officer named Kelso Dre, who had served beside him for nearly a century. Kelso, pull every record we have on the first expansion era, everything. I want to know who explored that region and why. Kelso nodded and moved quickly to the archive terminal. It took nearly an hour to gather what remained of the ancient files. Most records from that era had been lost, damaged, or deliberately erased over the centuries. But what Kelso found was enough to make even his steady hands tremble slightly as he read. Commander, Kelso said, I found something. A personal log. From Fleet Commander Irisa Thole, one of the original Council expansion commanders. She led the 14th expedition to that region. Play it, Threx ordered. The recording crackled to life, ancient and damaged, the voice inside it distorted by 10,000 years of decay. But the words were still clear enough to understand. This is Fleet Commander Irisa Thole, log entry 3rd cycle of the approach. We have entered the outer boundary of the region designated by our scouts as anomalous. Sensor readings are inconsistent. Ships behind us report signal loss. I am ordering the fleet to halt and reassess. A pause. Static. Second entry. We have lost contact with 3 vessels in the rear formation. No debris, no wreckage signatures, no distress signals. They are simply gone. I am recalling the fleet immediately. Another pause, longer this time. When the voice returned, it was different. Shaken, breathless, filled with something Threx had never heard in a council commander's voice before. Final entry. It's not letting us leave. I don't understand what it is. I don't understand what we're looking at. It doesn't attack. It doesn't communicate. It simply takes. One by one. I am transmitting this warning to whoever finds it. Do not send fleets into this region. Do not send scouts. Do not send anyone. Whatever waits here has been waiting far longer than our council has existed, and I fear we have only just—" The recording cut off. The bridge was silent. "That's the last entry," Kelso said quietly. Fleet Commander Iressa Thol's ship was never heard from again. Neither was any ship from her fleet. The Council marked the region forbidden shortly after, and erased most records of the incident to avoid causing panic among the newly conquered worlds. Threx stared at the star map still glowing on the main screen, the small marked point deep within the forbidden region. 10,000 years, he said slowly. 10,000 years, and no one has gone near it since. Until now, Kelso said. Commander, the humans knew this. They knew exactly what they were pointing us toward. Threx's jaw tightened. A primitive species with no fleet, no weapons capable of harming us, somehow possessed knowledge that even our own council had forgotten. How is that possible? Kelso asked. I don't know, Threx admitted. But it changes things. Word of the ancient recording spread quickly through the fleet's command structure. Within hours, the other council commanders, leaders of the accompanying battle groups, representatives of the council's ruling assembly, had gathered in a secure communication chamber aboard Threx's ship, their holographic images filling the room in a circle of glowing light. This is absurd, said Commander Praxis Ilum, a younger and more aggressive officer who had never lost a battle in his short career. An old story, a damaged recording. We should not let ghost stories from 10,000 years ago stop us from claiming a new world. It is not a ghost story, Threx said sharply. It is a warning left by our own people, by a commander who led one of the most successful expansions in Council history before that region ended her and her entire fleet. Then we simply avoid the region, Praxis said. We do not need to go there. We invade Earth. We take what we came for. The humans played a trick on us, nothing more. And if it is not a trick? Asked another voice, Commander Selen Vok, an older officer known for her caution. If the humans truly believe that region holds something dangerous, and they were desperate enough to point us toward it instead of surrendering, what does that tell us? It tells us they are clever, Praxis said dismissively. No, Selen said. It tells us they were more afraid of provoking us directly than they were of whatever exists at those coordinates staying hidden. Think about it. A species with no fleet, no weapons, facing certain destruction, chose to reveal a secret location instead of fighting or surrendering. That is not the action of a species playing games. That is the action of a species with no other options. A species that understood exactly what kind of message would make us hesitate. The chamber fell quiet as her words settled over the group. There's something else, Kelso added, stepping forward to address the assembled commanders. We ran a deeper search through what remains of the pre-council archives, the species that built the ancient warning structures found on Earth. We don't know who they were. Their technology, based on what little data survived, was advanced beyond anything the Council currently possesses. And they marked that region as dangerous long before our Council even existed. So the humans didn't build whatever is there, Selen said slowly. They simply found the warning left by someone else, someone far more advanced than either us or them. Which raises the real question, Threx said, his voice low. If a species more advanced than the Council itself feared this location enough to mark it across countless star charts, and if 17 of our own expedition fleets died trying to explore it, what exactly is waiting there? No one had an answer. Praxis, still unwilling to back down, stepped forward with his arms crossed. Even if all of this is true, it changes nothing. We do not need to explore the region ourselves. We simply proceed with the invasion of Earth. The humans gambled that we would be too afraid to attack. We prove them wrong. Threx considered this for a long moment, the temptation to simply crush the small, defiant planet below and be done with the entire matter. No, he finally said. Not yet. Commander? Praxis said, surprised. If the humans are bluffing, Threx said, then a small scouting party sent to those coordinates will find nothing, and we will know for certain that Earth deceived us. We will return, and their punishment will be far worse for wasting our time. And if they are not bluffing? Celine asked quietly. Threx's eyes remained fixed on the star map, on the small marked point that had once swallowed 17 fleets whole. Then we will learn the truth before it is too late, he said. Prepare a strike force, 10 ships, volunteers only. We will send them to the coordinates ourselves, and we will see with our own eyes what the humans were so afraid of. Praxis frowned. And if they do not return? Threx turned away from the star map at last, his expression unreadable. Then we will have our answer, he said, and Earth's message will no longer seem so foolish. Back on Earth, deep within the command center, Sarah Chen received the sensor report with a mixture of relief and dread. Ma'am, the young officer said, the fleet is moving. A portion of it, 10 ships have broken formation. Sarah's chest tightened. Are they attacking? The officer checked his readings twice before answering, his voice unsteady. No, ma'am. They're not heading toward us at all. Sarah stepped closer to the screen, watching as the 10 ships slowly turned away from Earth, their engines igniting as they began to move outward, away from the planet, away from the solar system entirely. They're heading toward the coordinates, Sarah said quietly. On the smaller screen beside her, Elena's tired face went pale. They're really going, Elena whispered. They're actually going to look. Sarah watched the 10 ships shrink into the darkness of space on her monitor, moving steadily toward a location that had swallowed 17 fleets whole 10,000 years ago. A location that no living being had approached and survived since. Elena, Sarah said slowly, when your team decoded that warning, did you ever find anything about what happens to the ships that go there? Any detail at all about what actually waits at those coordinates? Elena was quiet for a long moment, her eyes distant, remembering something from years of research that she had never shared with anyone outside her own team. There was one symbol, she finally said, that appeared only once, in the very last chart we managed to decode. Different from all the others, we were never able to translate it fully, but my team had a theory. What theory? Sarah asked. Elena's voice dropped almost to a whisper. We think it wasn't a location marker at all, she said. We think it was a name. Sarah felt a cold chill run down her spine. A name for what? Elena looked up at the screen, at the tiny lights of 10 council ships disappearing into the vast darkness of space, moving steadily toward whatever waited for them at the end of their journey. We don't know, Elena admitted. But whatever it is, it's still out there, and in a few hours we're going to find out if it's still awake. The 10 council ships moved through the darkness of deep space, far beyond the edge of any charted system, far beyond anywhere a council fleet had traveled in 10,000 years. Captain Rennis Kyle stood on the bridge of the lead ship, the Talon's Edge, watching the stars slide past on the main viewport. He was young for a captain, only 90 years old by council standards, chosen for this mission because he had volunteered without hesitation. He wanted to prove himself. He wanted to be the one who showed the entire fleet that the ancient warning was nothing more than a ghost story told by frightened old commanders. Status report, Rennis said, keeping his voice steady. All systems normal, his navigator replied. We are 3 hours from the coordinates. Good, Rennis said. Let's see what has the entire council so afraid. Behind him on the communication channel, Fleet Commander Threx Voran's voice crackled through, distant and cold. Captain Kale, report your status every 30 minutes. If contact is lost for longer than 1 hour, the mission will be considered a failure, and no further ships will be sent. Understood, Commander, Rennis said. We will not fail. The channel closed. Rennis turned back to the viewport, staring at the endless stars ahead. He did not believe in old stories. He believed in strength, in council power, in the certainty that nothing in the galaxy could stand against 10 heavily armed warships. He was about to learn how wrong he was. 2 hours into the journey, the first ship reported a problem. Captain, the communications officer said, the Iron Wolf is reporting instrument failures. Their navigation system is giving inconsistent readings. Probably just interference, Rennis said. Tell them to run a diagnostic. The Iron Wolf ran its diagnostic. Nothing was wrong. And yet the strange readings continued. Small sensor errors, the kind of glitch that a technician might ignore any other day. But this was not any other day. An hour later, 3 more ships reported the same issue, then 4, then 5. "Captain," the navigator said, his voice tightening with concern, "our own instruments are starting to show it too. Small errors in the star charts, position readings that don't match our expected course." Rennis frowned, walking over to check the readings himself. The numbers on the screen flickered slightly, tiny inconsistencies that should not have existed on Council technology that had not failed in centuries. "Run a full system check," Rennis ordered. "All ships." The results came back the same across the entire fleet. Nothing was broken, nothing was malfunctioning, and yet every ship's instruments were behaving as if something, somewhere, was quietly reaching into their systems and nudging the numbers just slightly, just enough to notice. "Captain," the navigator said quietly, "we're 1 hour from the coordinates." Rennis stared at the star map, the small marked point drawing closer with every passing minute. For the first time since the mission began, a small seed of doubt crept into his chest. He pushed it away. He was a Council captain. He did not doubt. "Proceed," he ordered. "Full speed ahead." The fleet crossed into the outer boundary of the forbidden region exactly on schedule. At first, nothing happened. The 10 ships continued forward, their engines humming steadily, their sensors sweeping the empty space ahead for any sign of danger. There were no enemy fleets, no weapon platforms, no hidden defense stations, just empty, silent space, stretching out in every direction. "Commander," Rennis said into the communication channel, unable to hide the note of triumph in his voice, "we have entered the region. There is nothing here, no fleet, no weapon, no danger." The humans' warning was empty, a trick just as Commander Praxis suspected. There was a pause on the other end. Then Threx's voice returned, quiet and unconvinced. "Continue toward the exact coordinates, Captain. Report again when you arrive." "Understood," Rennis said, allowing himself a small smile. The fleet continued forward for another 20 minutes. The stars around them looked no different from any other region of space. No planets, no debris, no structures. Just distant points of light scattered across an empty black canvas. And then, without warning, every light on the Talon's edge went out. "Report!" Rennis shouted, gripping the edge of his command chair as the ship plunged into darkness. Emergency lighting flickered on a moment later, casting the bridge in a dim red glow. "Power failure," the engineering officer said, his voice tight with confusion. "Main reactor. It's still running, but something is draining the output. We've lost 80% of ship power in the last 10 seconds. "Same on the Iron Wolf," another voice crackled over the comm, filled with static. "We're losing power too. Something's pulling it out of the system. All ships report your status," Rennis ordered, trying to keep his voice steady despite the fear rising in his chest. One by one, the reports came in. Every ship in the fleet was experiencing the same power drain. A slow, steady loss of energy that no engineer could explain and no system could stop. "Captain," the navigator said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Look at the viewport." Rennis turned toward the main window, and his breath caught in his throat. Ahead of the fleet, where there had been nothing but empty space just minutes before, something was beginning to appear. At first it looked like a distortion, a shimmer in the darkness like heat rising off hot pavement. But as the ships watched, the shimmer began to take shape, growing larger, sharper, more defined. Structures began to emerge from the darkness, enormous shapes, larger than any of the Council's ships, larger than anything Rennis had ever seen in his 90 years of service. They were not ships. They were not weapons in any form Rennis recognized. They looked almost like buildings, or monuments, or something else entirely. Ancient, silent, and impossibly vast, floating in the empty space as if they had been waiting there since before the stars themselves had formed. And as the fleet watched, small lights began to flicker to life across the surface of the structures, one by one, like a city slowly waking up after a long, long sleep. "Captain," the engineering officer said, his voice shaking now. "Power drain has stopped, but something's different." I'm reading energy signatures now. Massive ones. They weren't there 30 seconds ago. Where are they coming from? Rennis asked, though some part of him already feared the answer. Everywhere, the officer said. The structures, they're active now. On the bridge of the Talon's edge, silence fell as every officer stared at the viewport, watching the ancient structures continue to light up, section by section, as if something vast and old was slowly opening its eyes for the first time in 10,000 years. Captain, the communications officer said quietly, Commander Threx is requesting an update. Rennis swallowed hard, trying to find his voice. Tell him we found something. Before the message could be sent, the ship shuddered violently. Alarms blared across the bridge. What was that? Rennis shouted. One of our ships, the sensor officer said, his voice cracking with panic. The Silverhawk, it's gone. Gone? Destroyed? No, sir, the officer said, staring at his screen in horror. There's no wreckage, no debris, no explosion signature, it's just gone, like it was never there at all. Rennis felt his blood run cold. He remembered the old recording, the words of Fleet Commander Iressa Thol, spoken 10,000 years ago in that same doomed voice. It doesn't attack, it doesn't communicate. It simply takes, one by one. All ships, retreat, Rennis shouted, his composure completely gone now. Full reverse now. The remaining 9 ships began to turn, their engines straining against whatever unseen force had been quietly draining their power. But it was too late. The ancient structures, now fully awake, began to move, and they did not fire weapons. They did not launch fighters or missiles. Instead, thin beams of pale light extended from the structures, reaching out across the darkness of space like fingers unfolding after a long sleep. Wherever the beams touched a ship, that ship simply flickered. Once, twice, and then vanished, leaving nothing behind. No wreckage, no debris, no trace that it had ever existed. Ship 2, gone, the sensor officer shouted. Ship 5, gone. Ship 7. Get us out of here, Rennis screamed, gripping the arms of his command chair so hard his knuckles turned pale. The Talon's edge surged forward, engines burning at maximum power, racing away from the awakening structures as fast as the ship could manage. Behind them, one by one, the remaining ships of the strike force winked out of existence, swallowed by the pale light reaching out from the ancient monuments. Rennis watched on the rear sensor display as ship after ship disappeared, until only the Talon's edge and one other vessel remained, both racing desperately toward the edge of the forbidden region. Captain, the communications officer said, his voice trembling. Commander Threx is demanding a status report. What do I tell him? Rennis stared out at the pale light chasing them through the darkness, at the ancient structures now fully illuminated behind them, vast and silent and terrifyingly patient. Tell him, Rennis said slowly, his voice barely a whisper. Tell him it's still awake. The message was the last thing the Talon's edge ever transmitted. A moment later, the pale light reached the ship, and it too flickered out of existence, leaving nothing behind but empty, silent space. Aboard the Council command ship, Fleet Commander Threx Foran stood frozen, staring at the final transmission still glowing on his screen. It's still awake. Commander, Kelso said quietly, we've lost contact with all 10 ships. No wreckage signatures, no distress beacons, nothing. The bridge was silent. Every officer stared at the star map, at the small marked point that had just swallowed 10 of the Council's finest warships in less than 5 minutes. Praxis, who had been so confident just hours earlier, stood pale and speechless, staring at the empty space where the strike force's signals had once been. That's, he began, then stopped, unable to finish the sentence.
That's what the humans knew, Selen said quietly, her voice heavy with the weight of understanding. That's what they were trying to warn us about. Threx said nothing, simply stared at the star map. At the region now marked in his own ship's systems, with a warning far more urgent than the ancient recording had ever conveyed. 10 ships, gone in minutes. And somewhere, deep in that ancient awakened place, Something vast and patient had just opened its eyes for the first time in 10,000 years. And it was no longer sleeping. Silence filled the command chamber aboard the Council flagship. 10 warships, gone. No wreckage, no survivors. No explanation that made any sense to minds that had spent centuries conquering entire worlds without ever losing a single battle. Fleet Commander Threx Veron stood motionless in front of the star map, staring at the small marked point that had swallowed his strike force whole. Round him, the other commanders remained quiet, none of them willing to speak first. Finally, Kelso Dre broke the silence. "Commander, orders." Threx did not answer right away. His mind was replaying the final transmission over and over. The young captain's trembling voice, the words that had come through just before the signal died forever. It's still awake. "Pull up everything we have on the human's original transmission," Threx said slowly. "The coordinates. Show me exactly what they sent, and nothing else." The data appeared on the main screen. A simple string of numbers, nothing more. No threat, no demand, no explanation. Just coordinates, sent without a single word of context. "They didn't explain anything," Threx said, almost to himself. "They didn't warn us. They didn't beg us to stay away. They simply pointed." "What are you thinking, Commander?" Slenvok asked carefully. Threx turned to face the gathered officers, his expression grim. "I'm thinking that we misunderstood their message from the very beginning. We assumed it was a trick, a bluff, an attempt to buy time. We assumed a species with no fleet and no weapons was playing games with a power far beyond their own." He paused, looking back at the star map. But what if it wasn't a trick at all? What if it was exactly what it appeared to be? A species with no way to fight us, with no way to defend themselves, doing the only thing they could do. Showing us the truth and letting us decide for ourselves whether to believe it. Praxis, still shaken from the loss of the strike force, shook his head slowly. "Even so, Commander, this changes nothing about our mission. Earth remains defenseless, could still invade, still claim the world, still. And do what?" Threx cut him off sharply. "Risk sending our main fleet close enough to a species that somehow possesses knowledge our own council lost 10,000 years ago. A species that knew about the silent grave when we did not. A species that chose to reveal that knowledge rather than fight us, rather than surrender to us, rather than beg us for mercy." He shook his head. "That is not the behavior of a weak, primitive species, Praxis. That is the behavior of a species that understood exactly what kind of message would make us hesitate. And it worked." The chamber fell silent again. "So what do we do?" Kelso asked quietly. Threx looked at the star map one final time, the small marked point that had claimed 10 of his ships in minutes. At the ancient structures that had slept for 10,000 years and were now, for the first time in all that history, fully awake. "We leave," Threx said. "We do not invade Earth. We do not provoke whatever we have just woken. We retreat and we report to the full Council Assembly what we have witnessed here today." "Retreat," Praxis said, disbelief clear in his voice. "Commander, the Council has never retreated from an unconquered world. Never, in 10,000 years. Then it is time we learn to make an exception," Threx said firmly. "I have led this fleet through 43 conquests, Praxis. I know the difference between a weak species we can crush without consequence and a threat we do not yet understand. Earth is the second kind. And I will not risk this entire fleet or possibly this entire sector of the galaxy to prove a point born of pride." No one argued further. Below, in the underground command center, Sarah Chen had not left her post in over 12 hours. Her eyes were red with exhaustion, but she refused to rest. Refused to look away from the main screen, where the massive council fleet remained frozen in Earth's orbit. "Ma'am," the young officer said, his voice hoarse from lack of sleep as well. "Sensor readings show. The fleet is moving." Sarah's heart nearly stopped. "Attacking?" The officer checked his readings twice, his hands trembling slightly. "No, ma'am. They're pulling back. All ships. They're retreating from orbit." Sarah stared at the screen in disbelief, watching as the massive dark shapes that had blocked out the sun for over 12 hours began, slowly to withdraw. Ship by ship, the Council fleet pulled away from Earth's atmosphere, gathering into formation at the edge of the solar system. "Alina," Sarah said, her voice barely steady, "are you seeing this?" On the smaller screen, Elena Vasquez's tired face broke into an expression of cautious disbelief. "I'm seeing it," she whispered. "I don't believe it, but I'm seeing it." Across the world, people who had spent half a day and night staring up at the alien fleet in fear now watched as the dark ship slowly shrank into the distance, retreating from the sky they had blocked for so long. In cities and villages on every continent, a strange, quiet hope began to spread. The kind of hope that comes only after staring directly into the face of destruction and somehow surviving it. "Incoming transmission," the young officer said suddenly, breaking the tense silence in the command center. "It's them, the council." Sarah exchanged a glance with the small screen where the president now watched as well, his face pale but composed. "I'll play it," she said. The same deep, cold voice that had delivered the ultimatum 12 hours earlier now filled the command center once more, though something in its tone had shifted subtly from command to something closer to caution. "People of Earth, this is Fleet Commander Threx Vorin of the Galactic Council. We have reconsidered our previous demand." A pause. "We do not wish to provoke a conflict with your world at this time. We are withdrawing our fleet from your solar system. We request a formal exchange of information regarding the region you directed us to investigate." Another pause. Longer this time, as if the alien commander himself was struggling with the words. "We ask for peace between our peoples. Not surrender. Peace." The transmission ended. For a long moment, nobody in the command center spoke. Then, quietly, the young officer let out a shaking breath and said, "They're asking us for peace." Sarah felt her legs nearly give out beneath her, the weight of 12 unbearable hours finally settling over her all at once. She turned to the smaller screen where the president sat in stunned silence, and where Elena's exhausted face had finally broken into something like a smile. Small, tired, but real. "We did it," Elena whispered. "We actually did it." In the days that followed, the story of Earth's response spread across the entire planet, and eventually across the stars themselves. The Council, humbled by the loss of 10 warships and the reawakening of something ancient and unknown, entered into careful, respectful communication with Earth's leaders, treating the small, previously unnoticed planet with a caution it had never shown any world before. Diplomats were exchanged. Careful agreements were made. Earth remained independent, unconquered, and for the first time, recognized among the stars, not as a defenseless target, but as a world that had somehow outwitted an empire without ever raising a single weapon. Sarah Chen was given a promotion she never asked for, and a level of security clearance she wasn't sure she wanted. She spent the following weeks studying reports of the Council's culture, their history, their fear of the region now permanently marked on every star chart in human and alien possession alike. The silent grave. Elena Vasquez returned to her research team, back to the deep ocean structure that had started everything. Back to the ancient symbols that had somehow warned an entire species 8 years before that warning would matter most. But not everyone involved in that long, terrifying day found easy rest. 3 weeks after the Council fleet's retreat, Elena stood once more inside the ocean research facility, staring at the ancient structure her team had studied for nearly a decade. The crystal panels still glowed faintly in the dim underwater light, their symbols as mysterious now as they had been the day her team first found them. "We've been running deeper scans," said Dr. Marcus Webb, one of her senior researchers, stepping up beside her. "Since the incident with the Council fleet, we picked up something new. A section of the archive we hadn't been able to access before.